In this video, I'm going to talk about the Unity player settings and specifically the setting that we need to enable to create a VR game for the Samsung Gear VR and Oculus platforms. But before I do that, I'm going to do some housekeeping. So come here to the build settings, and from the build settings, go to player settings. Set your company name. I'm going to use Burning Thumb Studios. And your product name should already be VR City. If you have an icon, you can set the icon texture here. I don't have an icon, so I'm just going to be using the default Unity icon. And then come down here and choose the mobile platform. It doesn't matter which mobile platform you choose. I've selected iOS. And you want to be in other settings, so make sure other settings is open. And scroll down here to the bundle identifier. And again, put in something that uses your domain name. For me, it's com.burningthumb and call it VR City. And you can switch over to Android and it should be the same there. So now that we've done the basic housekeeping, let's take a look at the setting that we need to enable virtual reality support for the Samsung Gear VR and the Oculus platforms. Just go back to the standalone settings for PC, Mac, and Linux and come down here and you'll see this thing called virtual reality supported in the other settings. All you need to do is turn that on. And once again, go to Android and double check that it's enabled there for Android. It should be. You may also want to change the minimum API level for Android. I'm going to go all the way up to Android 5. Just makes a lot more sense to change that here now instead of forgetting about it. All right, we've done all those things. Now I want to talk a bit about Gear VR and Oculus. Since we've selected VR supported and Unity has built-in support for these platforms, we're pretty much done. Any standard Unity game is going to work on those platforms. There are no special camera rigs required. You can, of course, download some of the utilities and use special camera rigs, but the point is you don't need them at this point. If I was just to come in here and disable my third-person controller and disable my combined car and enable my FPS controller, remember this is just a standard FPS controller provided by the Unity standard asset, I could build this game, deploy it to a Gear VR or Oculus, and it would work. I would get that split eye view. Of course, I'd still need to implement some kind of event system to support gaze input, but as it happens, we've got the Google Cardboard system implemented already, and that's going to work just fine for these other platforms. All we actually need to do is disable Google's VR support. So if I come back in, let me just now disable this and bring back my third-person controller. And I'll bring the combined car back as well, but I'll disable the input on the car so it's not driving all around. Back to the third-person controller, open that up, come down to Cardboard, go to Cardboard Main, I can just disable the VR mode here for Cardboard. I'm going to not maximize on play. I'm going to mute the audio. I'm going to run the game. Now I have Unity's built-in VR support. You'll notice I still have my reticle showing up here. One of the issues is that when I'm using the preview for Gear VR or Oculus, I don't get the split eye display here. It shows it to me just with a single camera. And also I don't have any simulated head tracking. So in this particular case, if I wanted to, I could move the camera around. Let me just do that just so you can see. Just grab the main camera and I'm going to frame on it here. And I'm going to change to rotate. This is how I would have to simulate head movement in this case. If I had an Oculus VR connected and was on a PC, then when I run the game, I will get that split eye view on the Oculus. For the Samsung VR, unfortunately, the only way to do it is I'm going to have to deploy the game to the Samsung VR. And once I deploy it to the Samsung VR, then I'll have the split eye view. I did also notice a small issue, which I'm going to fix right now on this main camera. I noticed that this clipping plane at 0.05 was a little too close, and so the tracking system provided by Google wasn't quite working properly, so I'm going to change that back to 0.1, just because we're going to be using it later, and I want to make sure that the reticle is still working properly.